Rabotai, I want to pick up on what I think is a fascinating topic. It's something that we touched upon this past Shabbat. And it's something that I'd like to tie up the loose ends with Siyata Dishmaya. I think the right way to start this, because the truth is, when you speak about Ma'arat Hamachpela, there is so much to say. On a historical level, on a halachic level, you wouldn't believe how much there is to jump into on this unbelievable Makom Kadosh. But Kidarki Bakodesh, I'd like to start with a story. Rabotai, listen to this. It's a story that maybe you heard over the years. This is a story about Rabbi Abraham Azulai, the grandfather of the Chidah. He at that time was the rabbi of Hebron, the chief rabbi. And it turns out that an incredible story took place. There was a pasha, an Arab, that he was in charge of the entire area. And he had an army. And there was no secret that this particular pasha had it out for the Jews. Every now and then he would visit Hebron, he would make trouble. One time he went to Ma'arat Hamachpela. And those were the years. I don't know if anyone remembers this. I remember many years ago when I was 13, the first time I went to Israel, 13 years old. It was actually like somewhat of a bar mitzvah present that my father let me go with a friend of ours, a family that was going. And we went to Ma'arat Hamachpela, and at that time, that side where the Arabs pray was still open for Jews to enter because it was before the Intifada. Before the Intifada. And I remember the hole in the ground. The hole that once upon a time was the top of a staircase. And on top of that hole there were bars that blocked it off from anybody going in or down. But there's a history behind this. A history that many of you might have heard over the years. The days of Rabbi Avraham Azulai, this pasha, when he came over, this Arab mufti, when he came over to visit Ma'arat Hamachpela, so he came to the top of the staircase, which at that time already people knew you don't go down. And somehow or other his sword slipped out of his hand. And this was a sword of honor, not just a sword of battle. It had all different types of inscriptions on it, and all different types of jewels and precious stones. It slipped out of his hand, the sword, and it went right down the steps, all the way down to the bottom, into the Ma'ara. He wanted his sword back. So he sent down the first Arab soldier, and he never comes back up. And he sends down the second and the third, and nobody comes back up. You know, in the old days, in the 80s, they used to have this commercial. It was the Roach Motel. It was this little, it was like a roach trap, but they called it the Roach Motel. And the motto was they checked in, but they didn't check out, right? So that's exactly what was going on in this story. The more soldiers he sent down the steps, they checked in, but they didn't check out. And the Arab and the mufti, the Arab pasha, realized that this is not something to mess with. So he decided, who's at fault? Who do you think is at fault? The sword slipped out of his hand. It went down into the Ma'ara. Who's at fault? The Jews, of course. It's a question. Of course. And because of that, he placed on the Jews this unbelievable gezerah. He said, you have 3 days to return me that sword, or the entire city, the entire Jewish city of Hebron is going to be wiped out. Now, who was the chief rabbi at that time? Rabbi Abraham Azulai, the grandfather of Chidah. It's amazing. This is brought from the Hakdama of the Sefer over there that he brings. And he says over there that they prayed, they davened, they fasted for 3 days. And right at the onset of the end of the 3 days, Rabbi Avraham Azulai decides, Leman Ir Hebron v'toshaveha. He enters the Ma'arat Hamachpela. He says goodbye to his children, goodbye to his wife. He has no idea what's going to happen. And he descends down the stairs into the Me'ara. And he says that we got down to the bottom of the steps. He enters the Me'ara, and there he sees, standing guard, an old man with a long white beard. And he asks him, Mi ata? And he tells him, Shmi Eliezer, Eved Abraham Avinu. Unbelievable. He's standing guard. You see what it means in Eved Ne'eman? You see what it means? Loyalty of once upon a time. Thousands of years. He's still standing by his master's side. So Rav Avram Azulai says, he's a Rav Avram Azulai, he's the Rav of Hebron. They spoke, and he says he was able to listen in. He tried to enter the Me'ara, he couldn't. It was too, the Avot HaKadoshim, they were there, it was not something he was able to deal. The light was too strong, he couldn't enter. But he was listening to the Torah that they were talking, and he heard the Torah of Gan Eden. And at the end of the story, he was told that once you were here, and once you saw what you saw, there's no way that you can return to live in this world the same way. Go home, you have 24 hours, say goodbye to your children, make your tzava, say goodbye to your wife. You have 24 hours to live, but you should know that in Shamayim you saved the city of Hebron. Obviously he found the sword, obviously. They brought it back to the Pasha, the Gezerah was over. But the next morning, Rabbi Avram Azulai, his neshama left him, as he left his family, as he left his wife and children, as he told everybody what it was that he witnessed. And he told them that the Avot HaKadoshim, they're down there and they're waiting for Klal Yisrael's Geula. Unbelievable. We have no idea what this place is. I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about this Ma'arat Hamachpela. I think this is, there's no wonder why all the years, all of our history, and we were constantly fought. It was a place of ongoing contention. There was practically never a time that Ma'arat Hamachpela was peacefully sitting in our hands without somebody trying to grab it away from us or stop us from entering. It's not a recent thing. If you look back at the history, way back, 1600s, way back, there was always a fight going on in this place. This great Makom Kadosh. No wonder. Take a look what's there. Take a look what's there. So I want to share with you tonight a few amazing facts about the Ma'arat Hamachpela, and then I'd like to rewrite the understanding of the why there's such a fight over this place. But at first glance, we're working with the idea that no wonder. Take a look at the story of Rabbi Avram Azulai, the Avot HaKadoshim, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I mean, I understand why the Goyim are trying so hard to keep us away. But wait, let's see if we're going to hold with that tonight. So Rabotai, here's a few amazing facts about Ma'arat Hamachpela that most people don't know. Most of these facts, Mar Makomot, are all taken from Reb Daniel Gladstein on his piece of the historical events of Ma'arat Hamachpela. I'd like to work with that, and then I'd like to tell you my own mahalach, if I may, with all humility. Let's hit a few amazing facts. First, I want to open up with the behind-the-scenes story. Abraham Avinu, we just read, was so committed. He was so bent on insisting he's ready to pay this fortune of money just to bury Sarah Imenu Ma'arat Hamachpela and later on himself, and later on the Avot HaKdoshim, which the Vilna Gaon already shows from the amount of times that the pasuk over there in the parasha says, Kevoret metecha, it says it 6 times. Says the Gaon, it says Kevor metecha 6 times, because Abraham already knew, Apiruach HaKodesh, that there are going to be 6 people that are going to be buried there. Abraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, Leah. So because of that, he was ready to give away a fortune, and he was ready to do whatever it took, even to deal with a crooked Ephron, just to buy Ma'arat Hamachpela without any questions. Amazing. But how did he know about this? Who opened his eyes for him to want this place and nowhere else? So Chazal tell us, and by the way, there are 2 versions to this story. 2 separate versions to this story. One way the story is told us by Chazal, you find this in the Sefer HaKushiyot, is that actually this started from Akedat Yitzchak. When he brought Yitzchak up to Har HaMoriah, and there was an aisle that was Ne'esach Basevach, he was stuck in the thicket. That aisle was supposed to be the replacement for Yitzchak. So once Yitzchak Avinu was taken off the Mizbeach and replaced with the aisle, that aisle, says the Sefer HaKushiyot in the name of the Medrash, before Abraham Avinu can grab that aisle as the replacement for his son, the Samach Mem, the Yetzer Hara, shows up to make trouble. He knows he was beaten. So how does he make trouble? So he says that he let the aisle go. He cut him out of the brush. And he let the aisle run. Abraham Avinu chases the aisle. Because once out of his mouth, his pikadosh, he said that we're going up to Har HaMoriah to bring an aisle. Once he said it, he needs to do it. Pekadosh. Hamedaber umkayem. Shechol divarav. Emet v'tzedek. So the aisle is running away. Abraham Avinu chases it. Where does the aisle run to? Says the Sefer HaKushiyot. It runs all the way down to Hebron, to Ma'arat Hamachpela, and it runs inside the cave. Now, Rabotai, we'll break for a moment for station identification. Anybody that knows the demographics of Israel, the run, the distance between Har HaMoriah and Hebron is, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, the distance. We're talking about days. By car it takes an hour and a half, or 2 hours, whatever. Abraham Avinu runs down after the aisle from Har HaMoriah to Hebron, sees the aisle go into Ma'arat Hamachpela, and Abraham Avinu enters Ma'arat Hamachpela. Says the Sefer HaKushiyot, as he enters the Me'ara, the cave, listen to what it says. V'ra'asham, he sees, shte mitot musaot v'nerot dolkim. 2 beds sitting in the Me'ara that were made with candles around the beds. Ushne zikenim na'im v'yafim. 2 old people that were beautiful looking, that were there laying on these beds. V'hiriach Abraham reach tov ba'me'ara me'riach Gan Eden. And he was able to smell the smell of Gan Eden in this me'ara, right next to these 2 beautifully old-looking people laying on the 2 beds. And he chapped that this is the great place of the burial of Adam and Chava. This is the way the Sefer HaKushiyot brings the story. Now, Rabotai, if you take a look at Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, he brings you a different version of the same story. This did not happen, according to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, by the story of Akedat Yitzchak. According to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, this happened by the story of the 3 Malachim. Abraham Avinu is sitting under the famous tree, which, by the way, it's amazing. If you go to Eretz Yisrael today, you take the tour in Hebron by Ma'arat Hamachpela. Part of the tour, they show you the tree, at least what they feel, al-pi what their tradition is. And the truth is, it's an amazing tree. It's something to see. It It looks nothing like the other trees in the area. They have a Kabbalah that was the tree he sat under when he was Mekabel, the 3 Malachim, the tree that Hashem came to him by the Brit Milah. Amazing. But nonetheless, listen to what happens, Rabotai. So, when the 3 Malachim came, Ve'el ben Habakar, Ratz Avraham, says the Pasuk. Says the Midrash, what do you mean Ratz Avraham? The Ben Bakar, this young calf, ran away. But he needed it for the guests. He needed to serve Hachnasat Orchim. He needed to serve the guests. So Ratz Avraham, Abraham ran after it. Not he ran to get it, which is the Pashup shot, right? But rather he ran after it. Says the Midrash Pirkei the Rebbe Lezer and Perik Lamed Vav, that Ben Bakar ran away and it ran into Me'arat Hamachpela, and Abraham Avinu chased right behind it. That's amazing. And sure enough, but this time the version of the story is a little different. It says, Nichnas v'sham matzah Adam v'Chava. Here it says it not too old, but he actually says the names. Adam v'Chava shochvim al mitot v'shenim. They're sleeping on beds v'nerot dolkim, with nerot around them. V'reach tov alehem kereach nichoach gan eden. Unbelievable. But then listen to these words. Says the Pirkei Lezer, when Abraham Avinu stumbled on Me'arat Hamachpela, Adam and Chava, lefikach chamad et Me'arat Hamachpela la'achuzat kaver. This is the reason why Abraham Avinu had that desire to want to one day be buried together with Adam and Chava in this very special place. So ever since then, he already had in mind that when the day comes, la'achuzat kaver, whether it be himself and Sarah Imenu, that's going to be the spot that he wants to come back to be able to bury him and his wife, and later on for the Avot HaKdoshim. To the extent that he was so moved by this Me'arat Hamachpela and the Reach of Gan Eden, and what he saw, that the Zohar HaKadosh in Parashat Chayei Sarah, he writes, and listen to these words, Begin the iu sale kol yuma di yuma. Once he found Me'arat Hamachpela, once he found the entrance of Gan Eden, once he saw Adam and Chava, Avraham would go back to the Me'arat Hamachpela every single day, and that's the place he was daven. That was his makom tefillah. He would go back to Me'arat Hamachpela every single day, and that is makom kavua for tefillah. That's the place that he prayed. That's the place that he davened for Sodom. That's the makom kavua, all the tefillot. Abraham Avinu, right there by Me'arat Hamachpela. Amazing. Rabotai, these are amazing facts. But I want to tell you that if you look a little bit deeper, you're going to see something now that to me was mind-blowing. And of course, I give Rabbi Gladstein, Hashem shall bless him, his ability to find Mar Mekomot is beyond imagination. And he helps so many of us who have to give over Torah to Klal Yisrael with such wonderful goods. If you take a look, you find the Yalkut Reuveni. He's a Yalkut of many different Midrashim and Ma'amarei Chazal, yet from the 1600s. That's when it was put. The Yalkut Reuveni writes that not 4 couples were buried in Me'arat Hamachpela, right? Kiryat Arba, 4 couples. No. He says not 4 couples were buried in Me'arat Hamachpela. But listen to this. Hezugot, 5 couples. Nikberu beMe'arat Hamachpela. 5 couples. Wait, 1 second. Who's the 5th couple? Adam and Chava, I get. Abraham, Sarah, Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, Leah. But who's number 5? You're not going to believe this. Says the Yalkut Reuveni, you want to know who the 5th one was? The 5th couple was none other than Moshe and Tzipporah. Moshe Rabbeinu. Now he asks on himself what you're thinking right now. Well, what are you talking about? Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, clearly, V'shama lo ta'avor. You are not entering Israel. I mean, you can't get clearer than that. And not just that, but more than that, the Pasuk says, Where did they bury him? They buried him in the desert. Vayikbor oto bagai be'eretz Moav mul bet Peor. He was buried in the desert outside of Israel. Velo yada ish kvurato ad hayom hazeh. Says the Yalkut Reuveni, yes. Velo yada ish et kvurato. No man will know his burial, but somebody else will know his burial. And who's that someone else? And he says, V'shama lo ta'avor. You, Moshe, will not enter Israel on your own, but rather they'll bring you into Israel. Who's they? Says Yalkut Reuveni, the Malachei HaSharet. The Malachei HaSharet carried over Moshe Rabbeinu from the Midbar into Eretz Yisrael, and they, V'lo yada ish kvurato, man will never know that. No, but the Malachim, they were the ones that brought him over. This wasn't given to mankind. This was given to the celestial angels. And they brought him into Ma'arat Hamachpela, and they buried him and Tzipora there as well. Amazing. Oh, this is wow. And if you see the Yalkut Reuveni, he writes over there, the four is the Niglot, the ones that are Yadua, but there are those that are Nistarot, the ones that are not Yadua. And Moshe and Tzipora actually are there as well as the fifth couple. And you know, the Chidah, Maran Chidah, he brings a remez. He says, yes. He cites the Yalkut Reuveni that Moshe Rabbeinu was also buried in Ma'arat Hamachpela. And then he brings a remez. The remez is that when the Torah talks about Ma'arat Hamachpela, it refers to it as Me'arat Sedeh Hamachpela. Rashi Tevot, Moshe. To tell you that Moshe is going to be there as well. Not just the Avot HaKdoshim. Amazing. But wait one second. But then why does the Torah say he was buried in the desert? Then just tell me, V'lo yada ish kvurato ad hayom hazeh. Finished. You have to tell me where he was buried? No. Just don't tell me anything. Just tell me nobody knows his kvura. And then sure enough, the angels will know. Man won't know. But to tell me that he was buried in the desert, and then he wasn't buried in the desert, what's going on here? So, Rabbi Gladstein here brings a Sifri in Vizot HaBeracha. And this is wow. I mean, everything is wow, but another great fact. And the Sifri says over here in Psikta Shunin Zayin, it says over here this amazing chidush. Minayin ata omer mehela yos'a mikvurato shel Moshe. How do you know that there was a tunnel that led underground out from the burial spot, from the grave of Moshe Rabbeinu, likvuratan shel avot HaKdoshim? There was a tunnel that led from the burial spot of Moshe Rabbeinu, from his grave, underground, all the way reaching to the burial of Avot HaKdoshim, to Ma'arat Hamachpela. Minayin, how do you know that there was such a thing? Shenemar, we're going to make now Gzera Shava. Vayamot sham Moshe, v'nemar lahalan shama kivru et Abraham et Sarah ishto. It's the same place because they were connected, Sham and Shama. They were connected by an underground tunnel. And he brings over here that Moshe Rabbeinu would go every morning from his place to Ma'arat Hamachpela to pray with Avot HaKdoshim. And then he would return. I mean, this is an unbelievable thing what's going on over here. You hear this. Many Mekubalim hold, al pi Kabbalah, that on Zayin Adar, which is obviously the yard side of Moshe Rabbeinu, they go dafka to Ma'arat Hamachpela to make the Hilula there. Because of the shmuz. Ma'arat Hamachpela, Makom Kivro Shel Moshe Rabbeinu, Tzipora, 5 zugot, not 4. Either Be'emet he was buried there full time, or there was a tunnel under the ground that came from the burial that gave him access. But the bottom line is, Moshe Rabbeinu Ma'arat Hamachpela along with the Avot HaKdoshim. I think it is a no-brainer, in truth, According to this Rama Mipano, I think it's brilliant. The Rama Mipano writes that in his opinion, the Shar HaShamayim for Tefillot is Ma'arat HaMachpela. And we always said the Kotel, we always said the Shar HaShamayim, it's the Makom Kadosh. What do you mean? That's Haramoriah. That's the Makom of Bet HaMikdash. The Rama Mipano would say that the Makom Tefillah, Shar HaShamayim, is Ma'arat HaMachpela. Abraham Avinu davened there. The Avot HaKdoshim davened there. Yoshua ben Nun, we know the Maisa, when he came in with the Meraglim, he was told, him and Kalev, to run to Ma'arat HaMachpela to daven, that they don't get pulled into the Avera, the Avon of Meraglim. This is a Makom for Tefillah that's unsurpassed. No wonder is it a place of such contention. No wonder is it a place that we're fighting throughout history. Ad hayom hazeh. It's unbelievable. But I want to tell you something else. Ad kan, this is the magnificent Mar Mekomot of Yididi Ahuvi, Reb Daniel Gladstein, Hashem shall bless him. I want to add something, if I just may. What time do you have, Jack? I just don't want to know what I'm dealing with.
7 to 9.
7?
To 9.
What?
7 minutes to 9.
7 minutes to 9, okay. I will tell you, I want to tell you a big yesod in life. Something that I hold beyond the amazing Mar Mekomot that we hit on tonight, which already is a big enough reason to tell you this incredible place, Ma'arat HaMachpela, and why the Goyim would fight us all these years for it. Ad hayom hazeh. Ad hayom hazeh. I want to tell you a secret, a sod. And I think this is something that pertains to our lives. Mamash, we see it all the time. But it's underestimated. Abraham Avinu comes to buy Ma'arat HaMachpela. He comes to Bnei Chet. And then they appoint Ephron HaChiti. Ephron Chiti is Milashon Chivi, from the snake, from the original Nachash. This guy was a Rasha, Merusha. They appointed him as the one to speak to Abraham Avinu. Some say he actually was the owner of that plot of Ma'arat HaMachpela, and he was coming out to make a deal with Abraham Avinu. At first telling him, in honor, the world famous Abraham, take it. No, chas v'shalom. To take it without money, Abraham Avinu knew exactly who he was dealing with. He knew if he doesn't pay for it, he knows if he doesn't get ripped off for it. Like this, there's no pircha, there's no she'elot, there's no ta'anot. No one can say anything. And even then, they still say. Abraham Avinu says, I'm paying for it. And sure enough, Abraham Avinu comes. And what does Ephron tell him? 400 shekel. Beni u bencha mahi. What's the big deal? Over la socher. I want it to be fine minted coins. Right? Pay me in cash. Something like that. I want fine minted coins. No checks. 400 shekel kesef. Beni u bencha mahi. You know the famous word they say. Beni u bencha. If you take the name Ephron, so it's 5 letters. The middle letter is a resh. You take the name Abraham, 5 letters. The middle letter is resh. Beni u bencha mahi. Middle of my name is a resh, 200. Middle of your name is a resh, 200. 200, 200. 400 shekel kesef. Beni u bencha equals 400 mahi. Amazing. The Torah is brilliant. It's interesting because right after that, it's very cute. It says that the next pasuk, Abraham Avinu starts counting the money in front of Ephron, and over there, Ephron is written without a vav. Now, if you spell Ephron without a vav, it's not 5 letters. Now it's 4 letters. So the beincha, the middle of Ephron is Ephes, 0. There is no middle. So Abraham Avinu says, I'll give you 200. There's only the middle of mine, Resh. But by you, Ephron without a vav, because you're a liar, is a 0. It was a bargain. It was a negotiation. But Abraham Avinu paid him 400 shekel kesef over la socher, minted fine coins. Amazing. What's up with this number 400? It's amazing. Every time this unbelievable Samach Mem Yetzer Hara shows up, he always flashes the same number. Esav, he shows up and he's coming now to fight Yaakov Avinu when he's coming back from the house of Levan. How many men is he coming with? 400 ish. 400 men. He's coming with the power of Tum'ah. He's coming with the Samach Mem's muscle, represented by the number 400. Esav, 400 men. Mitzrayim, Galut. How many years? 400 years. Unbelievable. It's constant. It's always 400. Any time we deal with the epitome of the strength of Tum'ah, it's always represented by the number 400. Ephron, 400. The Bnot Moav that come to make Klal Yisrael sin by the story of Zimri and Cosby. Pinchas comes and he kills them and stops the Magefa. The Magefa, the plague, was finished on the unbelievable Kanaut of Pinchas. What does the Pasuk in Tehillim say? Vayamod Pinchas vayifalel vayatzor et hamagefa. Vayifalel? Vayitpalel. What was vayifalel? What type of word is that? It means to pray. Amar Pinchas. Pinchas got up, vayifalel. Vayatzor et hamagefa, and that stopped the Magefa and saved Klal Yisrael. What's vayifalel? Vayitpalel. No. You know what he did? He murdered Zimri, he murdered Cosby, he raised them up like a shish kebab on a romach, and he let everyone know, if anyone else dares walk into the zanut with goyot, this is what's going to be their end. He cut down the koach of Arba Meot, the Yetzer Hara, and stopped them in his tracks. He got rid of the 400, and therefore he got rid of the tough. Vayifalel, not vayitpalel. There is no tough. The letter Taf, which is Gematria 400, was kicked out. Vayifalel. Pinchas. Later on, Pinchas becomes who? Eliyahu Navi. Pinchas Eliyahu. Eliyahu Navi. This is the great Eliyahu Navi. Rabotai, I want to share with you something amazing. And I want you to know that because Pinchas kicked out the power of 400 from Klal Yisrael, Vayifalel, he became the Antichrist. I don't know how else to say it. He became the power neged the 400. He's the one that strikes down this power of 400, of the Yetzer Hara, this Koach HaTum'ah, the Samach Mem. And where do I get this from? If you take a look in Ben Yoyada, you know, the Gaon tells us a great yesod, that if you want to know the true essence of a definition of a word, take a look at the first time it's mentioned in the Torah. That really sizes up the real essence of the definition. Says the Ben Yoyada something similar in Shas. The first time something is mentioned in Shas, or someone is mentioned in Shas, it hits on the essence of that thing or person. The first time Eliyahu Navi is mentioned in Shas, Dav Gimel Amud Aleph in Masechet Berachot, the famous Ma'aser of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi was wanting to pray Mincha. He was on the side of the road. There was too much distraction. He entered one of the Churbot of Yerushalayim and he prayed inside the broken down Churba, the ruins of the destructions of Jerusalem. He prayed inside one of those broken down haunted houses. When he finished, he turns around, and who's standing by the door watching him? He sees that there's someone standing there. He comes closer and says the Gemara, lo and behold, it was Eliyahu Hanavi. But how does the Gemara introduce you to Eliyahu Hanavi for the first time in Shas? Eliyahu Hanavi Zachur Litov. That's the way the Gemara writes it. The first time they mention Eliyahu in Shas, Eliyahu Hanavi Zachur Litov. Says Ben Yoyada, what's Pshat? Because Eliyahu Navi Zachor Letov is Gematria 400. He is the anti-force, Neged, the Koach Arba Me'ot of the Koach Samach Mem. He is the one that fights and is the power to withstand and to get rid of and break down and destroy and eradicate the Koach Arba Me'ot. Because he's Pinchas. He's the one that by the time of the Zenut of Benot Moav, he stopped the Magefa. Amad Pinchas vayifalel. He got rid of the tough. He got rid of the number 400. And he was able to overcome the Yetzer Hara, get rid of the Zenut, and save Klal Yisrael. So anytime this power shows up to try to hit the Jews, Eliyahu Navi is not far behind, ready to fight against. It's unbelievable. You know that famous Gemara in Kedushin. Where is it? I think it's Daf Mem. I should have looked it up before the share. It's either Daf Lamed, Daf Mem. It's in those sugyot. The Gemara talks over there about Reb Papa, Reb Huna, Hahimatronita. There was this duchess. I believe she came to one rabbi. I'll say Reb Papa, but I'm not sure. It might have been the other way. And she said to him, I want to do a sin with you. And Reb Papa enters into the oven and sits in the fire. She says, what are you doing? He says, what you're asking me to do is going to send me to the fires of Gehenna. I might as well go now. And she left him alone. And he had a ness. Nothing happened to him. Nothing happened to him. I believe it was Reb Huna. I know, please forgive me if I'm saying the wrong names. I can just simply say rabbis, but I should have looked it up before the class. But the Gemara says, Hahimatronita. There was this duchess. It seems like she got around. Hahimatronita. She came to, I believe it was Reb Huna, one of the rabbis in the marketplace. He was a basket weaver. And she said, how much? And he told her the price. He said, no, not for the basket, for you. I want to do an Avera with you. Reb Huna says, well, I'm in work clothes. I'm dirty. Let me go upstairs and wash myself and clean myself. And then I'll be able to do Averot like this. You don't want to be like this. So she let him go up. What does the Gemara say? He went up to the roof and he jumped off. Says the Gemara, listen to me, open your hearts. Eliyahu Hanavi came running from Arba Me'ot Mil. The Gemara says it in Kedushin, black and white. He came running from 400 miles away. Do we care how far away Eliyahu was? Eliyahu came running from 400 miles away, and he caught Reb Huna before he fell. Says the Maharsha, an unbelievable fact that this must blow your mind. He says, from this Gemara we have a havtacha, a promise, a guarantee. Anybody that's put into that position, even if he needs to do something as desperate as Reb Huna, and puts his life into sakana, he has a guarantee that Eliyahu Navi will be there to save him. Because he is the appointed anti-Arba Me'ot. So here's a guy in a trophy tower in New York City on the 57th floor, and he's in the office working late at night, and lo aleinu v'lo aleichem, someone walks up to him in the office and commissions him and tells him there's no one here. And he's cornered. If he jumps out that window, I know I sound like a radical now, forgive me, I beg you. But if he jumps, I'm just telling you what the Maharsha says. I'm just breaking it down into terms. Don't shoot the messenger. But if he jumps out the window, he has a guarantee that the koach of the anti-Arba Me'ot, Eliyahu Navi, is going to come running and catch him like he caught Reb Huna. Don't try this at home, kids, please. Do you understand what we're talking about here? This is the pshat. Ephron hachivi hachiti. He was from the original essence of the nachash. Chivi, chiti. In Aramaic, chivi is a snake. He's the Chiti, he's the Chivi. Sometimes in Chazal he's called Ephron HaChiti, sometimes he's called Ephron HaChivi. He's from the original snake. He represents the Koach of the Arba Me'ot. He says, Abraham Avinu, you want to buy Ma'arat Hamachpela? You want to buy the spot that's the Shar HaShamayim for Tefillah? You want to buy the spot that has the Reach Gan Eden? You want to buy the spot that Adam and Chava is buried there? If I give that to you, your people are going to be unstoppable. So I have to be machnis into the deal, a little poison. I got to be machnis into the very kinyan. And Arba Me'ot. I got to put the koyach hatum'ah in the consecration of the deal, the kinyan itself. Arba Me'ot shekel kesef, beni u bencha mahi. This is what's going to stand between us for the rest of history. That's the way to read the pasuk. Arba Me'ot is going to stand beni u bencha forever. That's why this is the place of contention. That's why this is the place that we're always fighting over. Because in the get-go, from the first kickoff of the actual kinyan and purchase in the transaction itself, he inserted the poison of the Koach Arba Me'ot. He gave it to us, but he poisoned it in the past process so that we can never really get it. Because if we had it, it'll be all over. It'll be all over. Imagine if Klal Yisrael was able to really banutz. They were able to really use that Ma'arat Hamachpela, the Makom, the Ramami Pano, the Shar HaShamayim of Tefillah, the Avot HaKdoshim, Moshe Rabbeinu. Can you imagine? Moshe Rabbeinu. No. Everything goes after the beginning. Hakol holech achar hagmar, that is true. But hakol holech achar ha'atchala, v'hatchala kashot. And this is where we learn it from. From the beginning, he already set us on a path that this is going to be a place that for the rest of time, the Arba Me'ot is going to stand between me and you, and you're going to have to fight me for this. I can't give this up to you, because I give this up to you, Klal Yisrael will reign supreme. Unbelievable. We should be zocheh. Israel's opening up now, at least that's what we're hearing. They're talking about allowing people to come back in. At least us, the American Jewish crowd, to be able to make it back to Eretz Yisrael. Listen to me well, guys. I want to tell you something and I want you to hear me. People go to the Kotel for 40 days. And they tell you, I davened every single day. I didn't miss a day. I want to tell you something. Kol hakavod lecha. You went to the Kotel and davened 40 days. I used to do that as a bacher very, very many times when I was there in yeshiva, and later on when I was there in Kolel. I went 40 days many times. And it's a big thing that you go every day, the same tefillah, the same tefillah, the same tefillah, the same tefillah. Kavel Hashem. Chazak v'ametz libecha v'kavel Hashem. Kavel Hashem. Again and again and again. It's a big thing. I want to tell you something. 40 days is great. But I can tell you, since March of 2020, I can tell you that I have not missed one day since Israel closed, begging the Ribbono Shel Olam to open her up again and let us go back, please, at least one more time, just to stand again by the Kotel, one more Vatikin, to go up north to the Arizal's mikveh, to stand by the Rambam and ask him a stira, to come down to Ma'arat Hamachpela and be able to put your hands up and down the walls of those steps and daven in front of the Avot HaKdoshim and to look under the tree that maybe Abraham Avinu really sat and accepted the Orchim and make your way back and forth, to Shiloh, to the Makom of the Mishkan. I didn't miss a day. From the minute COVID started and Israel closed to today, I didn't miss one day, not one day of davening and pleading and begging, give us another chance. Open it up, even for a little bit, just to get us there. Just to get another opportunity, but even better, to be able to get that moment that we can actually stand, Ma'arat Hamachpela, Shara Tefillah Min HaShamayim, and finally see this Geula Krova. Amen.